You can't always tell if you're being discriminated, especially with stuff like ableism in my experience. I cannot speak to all forms of discrimination because I'm simply not every single type of minority. Surprise there. What I mean by that is if someone seems like they're ignoring you, maybe they actually didn't hear you. Maybe it's something other reason why they're ignoring you. Maybe they're not ignoring you, but you just don't realize that. But maybe they actually are ignoring you because they're discriminatory. Maybe you actually did not get the raise, not because of discrimination, but because of some other reason, because maybe someone else's was more noticeable. This happens especially with small things, and it's really, really hard because when you have this constantly happening to you, you're constantly wondering whether it was discrimination or not, and you're constantly doubting yourself. It leads to a lot of nervousness, but it also leads to people taking advantage of it and saying like, are you really sure that something is going on? Or second guessing to you to the most extreme, gaslighting you. And yeah, it causes a ton of anxiety. I don't know a perfect way of doing it when you yourself face it, except for learning ways like how the world operates by noticing lots of patterns, but that takes a lot of mental energy to talking through with people that are usually the same type of minority as you, that face similar problems, to finding good voice, maybe getting a therapist or learning relaxation techniques. None of it's perfect, but you do know it's real, even if you don't know these individual cases are real, because you just see the bigger pattern. Like when I see a bunch of people walking down the aisle wrong, when with the COVID restrictions, not buying I know some people say, oh, maybe they just have some processing disorder, executive function thing, and they didn't notice the lines because this is too much, overwhelming, when people don't follow little rules. Well, fine. Maybe if it's 1 or 2 out of 100, but when you see like over 50%, it's like, yeah, some people are not following the rules because they just don't care. And you don't know but you don't even know if each individual case is that. So many things like that where you just can't point at any individual case. But all this to me means that laws that we put in the workplace to say that you can't discriminate, do not work well on schools by themselves. You can't just say someone don't discriminate, and when you bring it up to sue for like discrimination or something, people can easily doubt it because you can find 1,000 reasons always why it wasn't that, unless there's a really obvious claim, like they just said something, a slur at you and stuff, and it's well recorded and everything. So, how do I think there's a ways around this for society? Well, first way is I think we need to have better accommodations for all types of people. And that means better accommodations for people with disabilities, people with different cultural backgrounds, so they can take different holidays off, for working parents and moms, or just also working fathers that take care of their children, stuff like that. And now, this might not fight as directly against racism or sexism, because I'm talking more about disabilities, or easy to put accommodations like build a ramp. But it does fight it at least indirectly, because the more intersections there are, the harder it is. So if I get rid of one thing, it helps more people, because it's not cumulative. It's not like one thing adds up onto each other. It's more like they compound to even greater than alone. Such as Crenshaw pointed out in her intersectionality theory, that black women get paid a lot less than you expect from them just being black or women alone, because they find it a lot harder to get jobs in general, the educational things and the outlooks and everything makes it much harder for them. But also, like, if you have a disability, you're a lot less taken seriously if you're POC, if you're a woman, if you're non-cis male, a bunch of things. So indirectly, yes, but also accommodations for letting people take time off for maternity leave, and as I discussed, there also needs to be paternity leave before. That will help women. So little things about dressing styles, to you can make dresses and hairstyles and stuff to be more culturally sensitive and more racially aware. So yes, you can find some accommodations for that. Better training. So we need better anti-discrimination training, or better training to help you aware. And part of it needs to learn that everyone has some bias, and that bias is bad, but if you don't admit that you have bias, you can't work against it. Yeah. Another thing that could really help, I think, would be a better education system in the schools and stuff, where we talk about all these issues and we don't just leave them be, but we also learn to be kind of folks. Then we're not always trying to be number one on the ladder. We work together and not against each other. Because school right now is highly competitive. It's all about me being better than you. We take tests to do that, just to show how much better than I am, or it's just a simple measure. There's no reward for helping other people, being kind. And we also don't learn how to work with our emotions well. So people get upset and angry. The most one biggest example that was common, I think, is toxic masculinity, and they take the anger and upsetness of other people, or they think, and schools teach us that we deserve stuff when we get them because of position in society. And yes, everyone deserves decency, but you don't deserve to be over someone else, to be greater than someone else necessarily. Oftentimes, there are exceptions. If you deserve to be better than a bigot, I totally agree with that. But if school taught us how to be more open-minded, how to deal better with our emotions and be happier about racism and sexism and all these other things, and how to accommodate different types of people, then we would stop it at the source. And we could also train people so they can have more jobs and they can enter the workforce in more places, or start their own company to get rid of the problems. The same as with training. Training can help hire more people with disabilities and all types of people outside of that list. The final idea listed, and I'm going to add one more after this one, is a safe list. And this will be a list of places that will be safe to apply for, because they have like reviews of people with disabilities or different racial backgrounds or cultures, and saying that this is a good place to work at. So you know where to apply more. It won't be perfect, and I can see many ways of doing it, but I can't see a good way, a perfect way, because who makes the list and who do you trust? If we're talking about outside organizations, it's really hard to do it unless there's a big blow-up or investigation, because you're only seeing that place for like a couple days. Where do you get the funding for it? Or you're only seeing it at the very surface level and you're not working for it. Then you could have other issues that there could be some, you say it's not this, it doesn't have any ableism, but you weren't that type of disabled person that they discriminate against. Or that they don't have a racial issue, but but that's because you came from a different background and wasn't compounded as much with other intersections. So the safe list might be hard, and also then you can make a safe list with the workers stuff, but how do you vet that these people weren't just angry and just wrote a long angry rant? The angry white dude that got fired that says they're discriminating against white dudes, for example. Or how do you make the list? Or how do you quantify it? Because if someone just has only been to this one place and has no comparison. So I think these lists should be made, but they won't be nearly that good. And sometimes maybe messed up. The last thing that I forgot to add here would be a place where we write down different hiring practices to make the whole system more fair, or entering practices. I talked about this briefly for schools and jobs, where we can add a bit more randomness, because cutoffs, if you cut off someone after a certain score, it doesn't really matter. If someone gets 1 point lower in SAT, it really doesn't affect their intelligence that much not intelligence, ability to succeed in college, because the SAT is not that good of a predictor, but other predictors are not that good, but leads to more discrimination. We can look at ways to blind interviews' names. So we can mix up names on different applicants to some extent so they don't all look the same or have that cultural bias against them. That's not perfect. We can have them doing different voices. Interviews with Snapchat filters even, so you don't see the face. None of these are perfect because at some point you do have to identify an interviewer. You can also look up the matching interviews with similar backgrounds. So it's not perfect, I wouldn't say by far perfect, but it's just a little thing to add to the puzzle of how to solve this in the long run. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe and share. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers in a year and 4,000 watch hours. If I get 4,000 watch hours in a year and have 1,000 subscribers, I can make this channel endorsed and stuff, and I can spend more time on it and make higher quality stuff and help pay for some of my bills. But if you have any ideas for future videos or comments or suggestions, anything at all, leave them in the comment section below. It does help me out. Or just DM me. But feel free to DM me, but I don't want to give out my DMs, so I won't give it out. Thank you very much. Goodbye.